While he's getting set up, I will just give the quick plug on where you are today. So here you are at Betaworks Studios. This is a membership club for people who make things. And what we try to do is, it's a portfolio company of Betaworks Ventures, and what we try to do is you apply, and as long as you're someone who is making something, it's a couple $100s a month. As you can see, there's no desks, right? So it's not a co-working space. It's really sort of the missing layer of the new way people work, where people can actually get together and get to know each other, and not just go into a glass cube and get work done, but this can be a place to show up and meet people who are building in your category. So tonight we're talking about voice interfaces. We have an event tomorrow. We're talking about synthetic reality, which I'm happy to talk to you guys about later about what that is. We made up that word, so that's why you don't know what it is. So if you are interested in finding out what other kinds of events are happening, you can go to betaworks-studios.com/calendar. Just Google Betaworks Studios calendar. And if you would like to get a tour of sort of the broader space, we have a podcast recording area, we have a bunch of conference rooms, a couple conference rooms, and then some areas to take phone calls, but mainly it's to meet other people, and we try to have as much programming as possible. Many of us at Betaworks curate individual events. The one I curate is the one called Inside the Investment Committee, where we once a month on Fridays, we have a VC fund, typically one who's based in New York, come in with at least 2 of their partners. Someone pitches them in front of 20 or 30 other people. And you get to hear the kinds of questions that they're getting asked. You get to then hear them. The person then goes and sits back down, and they talk about the company to each other. And so you get to hear what the VC is saying. Obviously, they're in front of people, but how they're thinking about this company, what they think are exciting about it, what they think the risks are, and then they open up to questions, and you can ask them what questions. So that's a plug for the event that I curate. But there's a whole bunch of different events that are here, so you can ask at the front desk if you'd like to get a day pass or to learn more.
So one thing we're doing, we do have 7 people that are part of our event, which is a record, and we're doing questions@botsandai.com, and we'll scroll through really quick. We'll pick a couple and go through just to keep things moving, so we're not running mics around and spending time on that to get you the most content we can as quickly as we can.
Cool. So I'm going to talk about what I call the next sound wave. I was going to call it voice 3.0, the next wave in voice interfaces, but I thought the next sound wave was cuter. And I will try to make this broad and to then hopefully go right to some questions. So the third wave of voice. I said who I am, kind of, but so I told you about Betaworks Studios. I am a partner on our venture capital fund. So we at Betaworks invest in brand new companies. So usually at the very earliest stages, there's a product that someone has built. It's a couple people on the team. And we've made a number of investments in social, the way that people communicate generally, so it tended to be social media. About 4 years ago, we started looking very deeply in voice as one of those verticals. And I think that now we are one of the most prolific investors, if not the most prolific investor in voice. So we're the first investor in Gimlet Media, which is HBO for podcasting. We were the first investor in Anchor. They actually started out of this space. Their desk was about there. And they are the easiest way to create a podcast. Both of those companies were acquired by Spotify earlier this year. We're investors in a company called Shine, which has a subscription service. It's a text message and a subscription service where it's almost like a daily positive affirmations, but they remind you of sort of like a Headspace style where you can listen to it, and they're 5-6 minutes long. We did Voice Camp, which was a pre-seed program only focused on voice interface companies. This was a couple of years ago, where we invested in 8 companies, all building the future of voice. And a number of other companies. I will plug, I'll just go through all of them. I'll try to be fast. Spoken Layer, which turns written content into podcasts. Jovo, which is a technology platform for building voice interfaces and building, in general, multimodal experiences. So how do you interact with, I want to interact with voice over here. I might have a TV over here and a screen, so I want to interact with the screen over here. I curate a newsletter called hearingvoices.xyz. I also have a podcast called TLDR Daily. It is 5 minutes long. So you can definitely just squeeze it in. And also, it's daily, but only when it's running. So we're about to launch the second season. But it's 5 minutes. Somebody interesting tells you about an article they're reading, and they give you the too long didn't read. So it's called TLDR Daily. And then I built a skill called Wi-Fi, which it's an Alexa skill that tells you the Wi-Fi password in your room, in the room that you're in. So it is very not secure because it just says the password out loud. But it's very convenient if you don't want to go and find out what the password is. So, and that's got a fair number. I think it's got about 15 or 20,000 installs on Alexa now. So we do a lot around voice interfaces. And if we think about where we were, Wave 1.0 of voice was the iPod, right? They're called podcasts because they were on an iPod. And we view Wave 1 as podcasting and RSS feeds and people in their garages with microphones and sort of that era of podcasting. If we think about Wave, what was I going to say on this slide? That's old, I guess. If we think about what Wave 2 was, it's moving to streaming, right? So we started having these old podcasts, they're not connected to the internet, and we started to stream, and that's really when we started to see podcasts like Serial emerge. And what we had started to focus on at Betaworks was seeing this renaissance of podcasts. And right before Serial came out, our thesis was one, that cell phone coverage was getting better. Two was that battery life was getting longer. So now you have good cell phone coverage and good battery life. You can walk around and listen to stuff on your phone. And that, if you remember, there was a time where you were like, well, should I listen to something or is my phone going to die? And then the third thing that kind of intersected with that was smart cars. So cars were when we started looking at this in 2014, they were just under 50% of cars were considered connected. And it takes about 7 years before a car cycle increases. And so we said, okay, in the next 7 years, it's going to go from 50% to about 95%. I think we're at 95% now, and supposedly next year will be 99%. So that was the thesis in 2014. And then smart speakers came out. So this sort of supercharged our thesis, at least around voice. So not only do you have phones, but now you have smart speakers. So what does that mean for Wave 3? What does the crystal ball say of what's coming in the next 5 years? We look at 4 different categories. This is where I think we have some more animated GIFs and less unsplash images. The first category is discovery. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier when we first started was, okay, so now you've started your podcast, you've built your Alexa skill, how do people find out about it? We think there's going to be a whole infrastructure built around this. We're starting to see some of it. You have podcasting apps like Breaker, to some degree Overcast, that share with you what other people are listening to. But how does the discovery part of podcasting change? That's a question that we have. Second question we have for the world is, and for startups, is what's the way that monetization is going to work? Today, we know there's advertising. We've seen a lot, probably the people in this room are familiar that in China, there's a whole bunch of paid podcasts. That's not the case here for the most part. We're seeing some. But what does monetization look like? And is it just selling extra episodes? Is it selling t-shirts? Is it events? That's sort of what it's been in the past. What are the new ways that monetization can take place? I personally think apps like Headspace are interesting because we don't think about them as podcasts, but we do pay $15 a month for them. So they're monetizing what is effectively a podcast. The third one is what we call internally sort of AirPod first technology. So moving from podcasting to thinking about what real utilities look like. And I picked this image specifically, or photoshopped this image together specifically because AirPods, I think, today they are not, but they have the potential to be like an Alexa in your ears. Right, so today the APIs that Apple has made available are not so interactive, but there are some. I don't know if any of you have used the Siri version of Venmo. You can double tap and say Venmo someone, and it will basically compose a Venmo request or a Venmo charge. But most product apps don't use these well, and the problem, in my view, today is that still happens in your pocket. You still need a screen. But what happens when they really function like Alexa devices, and when you're walking around, you can have your own Alexa in your ear? Finally, I think I thought this was funny. This is a synthesizer inside of a mouth because synthetic voice. So today we have Alexa as the voice. We have Google Duplex as creating some voices. I think that there's this big gap, particularly when we talk about utilities in voice. There's a gap between listening to Siri read you a whole article and having a human being read it. And today, the content that we're getting from Alexa needs to be auto-recorded because it's so terrible to listen to Alexa talk at you for... Amazon won't even let Alexa talk to you for more than 90 seconds, right? So it's all human beings, but what that means is we can't really customize it, right? It can't really be a customized feed for you because at the end of the day, it's a person reading it, right? And so as synthetic voice gets better and we start to have voices that have personality, we start to have voices that don't, the choices aren't just between Siri woman voice and Siri Australian man voice, but actually voices that don't sound terrible reading you entire articles or telling you more than just what the weather is. I think that's going to open up and unlock a whole bunch of potential utilities. Oh, that's the last one. So that's where we think the future is. I don't know if we have time for questions or not. I know I think that might have been my full 10 minutes, but if you are building something in one of these future categories, Betaworks Ventures would love to talk to you. I'm at Matt Hartman on Twitter. My email is m@Betaworks. And thank you guys so much for coming, and thanks for putting it together.
Thank you.